Even if you are an ordinary stone, it will be forged into steel here. What you see is just a countdown to the lives of a group of people. A modern person travels back to that era of war, and after experiencing the baptism of war, step by step becomes a qualified warrior. And all of this starts with Changjin Lake. Expected to travel through the world. Changjin Lake, Shuimen Bridge, my squad leader, my squad, tunnel warfare, flower wreath under high mountains, Jinling. Jinling. Blood Battle Hacksaw Ridge, Normandy Landing, and other war-themed movies and TV shows, as well as game themes such as Forest, Escape, and Grand Theft. Keywords of the novel. Zhutian starts from Changjin Lake without pop-ups. Zhutian starts from Changjin Lake. Download the complete text, and Zhutian starts from Changjin Lake to read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Changjin Lake. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Changjin Lake. Endless darkness strikes. Xia Yuan only felt his gaze obstructed, as if the sky was rapidly darkening. When his gaze returned, what appeared before him were half yellow and half green mountains, clear and turbulent streams, and a spotless sky. The autumn wind is howling, and a cold wind suddenly rises. I really got involved in the movie Chosen Lake. He clenched his fist, feeling his own touch, environment, and the bleak autumn wind. Everything was so unreal. The picturesque scene before me is like a dream. The sky was a bit cold, and Xia Yuan only wore a long-sleeved hoodie, which could withstand some of the cold. Coupled with practicing martial arts since childhood, he didn't shiver from the cold. System, view tasks. Task. Complete the Battle of Changjin Lake / Shuimen Bridge. Ding. Enter the mission world and open the personal attribute panel. Obtain identity. Son of the master of the Chinese martial arts school, ancestral home in Huzhou, Zhejiang, Ding. Get a beginner gift pack *1, note. The beginner gift pack can activate a master level skill, with a small chance of obtaining a master level skill. Xia Yuan frowned and turned a blind eye to the prompts behind him, worrying about this task. In 1950, the People's Volunteer Army and the U.S. military engaged in combat in the Chosen Lake area of North Korea. It was winter and the lowest temperature in North Korea could drop to -40°C. The harsh weather conditions are not a big deal, and the thin clothing of the volunteer army is the key. According to incomplete statistics, there are 4,000 volunteer soldiers frozen to death and 20,000 frostbitten on the Korean battlefield alone. The war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea created a peak in the history of human light infantry, with infantry defeating the U.S. military with mobile units, which is unimaginable. But how many people died among them? It can be said that the victory of the Korean War was entirely achieved through the accumulation of fresh lives. Wuqianli stood in place for 2 full minutes, but his gaze became firm as he said, "It's a blessing, not a disaster. It's a disaster that can't be avoided. Since our ancestors were able to complete it, why can't I? Most of our ancestors joined the army in the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, and I can do the same. Besides, as a martial arts practitioner, how can I shrink back? It's better to die in battle than to die in mediocrity. With this system in place, there is no room for maneuver. Let's take a trip along the path of our predecessors and experience the turbulence of that era. Besides, I have a system, but I may not necessarily die in this battle." Gently exhale, Xia Yuan opens the Personal Attributes panel to view the updated personal attributes. Name. Xia Yuan, age. 24, gender. Male, health. 100%, determines your health level, varies based on the degree of injury, strength. 1.78, determines your attack power, weight, etc. And is affected by physical fitness. Agility. 1.51, determines your running speed, body coordination, etc., influenced by physical fitness. Constitution. 1.50 determines your endurance, affects strength and agility. Intelligence. 1.0 determines your learning acceptance ability. Note: the four-dimensional attribute of an ordinary adult is 1. Mastery skills. Octopus fist proficiency level, 85287/100000, English beginner level, 746/1000, Chinese master level, 311257/10000000, skill proficiency level. Beginner, 1000, proficient, 10,000, specialized, 100000, master, 10000000, grandmaster, 1000000000. There is not much data, and it can even be said to be simple, extremely simple, but it encompasses all of his body. Strength, agility, physical fitness, intelligence are the fundamental four-dimensional attributes of human beings, and skills should be given by the system. As for health, it is highly valued. It is very convenient to visually see the changes in one's own state. And his four-dimensional attributes are much higher than ordinary people, which is inseparable from Xia Yuan's practice of martial arts since childhood. Xia Yuan's ancestors were descendants of the 8 Extremes Fist, who practiced martial arts from a young age. For over a decade, the cold, winter, and heat have never ceased. He opened a martial arts school at home with over 30 students. He is the eldest senior brother in the school and graduated successfully from a university, achieving success in his studies. He also did not fall behind in martial arts practice. But not long ago, he obtained this unnamed system and was immediately tasked with entering Changjin Lake. Changjin Lake is a movie that I traveled through and is expected to break the box office record. This movie has also sparked modern people's thinking and determination to defend their country. It is a rare and good movie. His father, the owner of the 8 Extremes Fist School, booked a movie and went to watch it with everyone from the martial arts school. It is said that it is to let everyone know and understand the pioneering works created by the ancestors of that era that shook the world. This war has caused a sensation all over the world, and it is even more of a war to establish a country. Xia Yuan only looked at Changjin Lake once. I didn't expect to rush through here. This time traveling was too rushed and caught him off guard. If he knew he would travel, he would definitely watch it a few more times. By the way, besides opening the property panel, there seems to be a beginner gift package. Xia Yuan has scanned a simple attribute panel and is very satisfied with his attribute panel, which is close to twice the physical fitness of an ordinary adult. This is inseparable from his daily exercise routine. Newcomer gift package. The system is quite user-friendly, at least giving oneself a gift package. 100% acquire a master level skill, and the system has provided an explanation for the level of the skill. I have studied the 8 Extremes Fist for more than 10 years before becoming proficient, but the beginner gift package can actually give me a master level skill directly. There is even a chance to develop master level skills. Dad bless, you must develop a good skill, otherwise you'll just wait for the ultimate. After confirmation, Xia Yuan prayed in his heart and hesitated for a moment before directly choosing to open the beginner gift pack. Ding, obtained. Throwing master level skill, free attribute point *0.50, note. The reward for opening the gift package depends on the world in which the host participates. 2 items. Bombing. It's similar to Wuqianli's skill of throwing stones. It seems that the item opened in this gift package comes from Wuqianli. Choose to claim. There are many bombing techniques in the brain, such as wind resistance, parabolic trajectory of bombing, power control, instructions for grenade explosion time, and so on. These skills and experiences were like a stone, forcefully stuffed into Xia Yuan's brain, and his head suddenly became dizzy and swollen. I didn't expect a small throw to have so many technical essentials inside. After flipping through the techniques stuffed into his mind, Xia Yuan realized that he had underestimated this throwing technique. If he used it on the battlefield, it would be a safe and powerful weapon. The 0.50 attribute given by the beginner gift package is extremely incredible. According to the system's given value, the strength of an ordinary adult is equivalent to 1 point, while the beginner gift package directly gives half of the strength of an adult. Undoubtedly, the attribute of 0.50 is added to power, combined with throwing techniques, which can exert super powerful effects and is also suitable for one's own 8 extremes fist. Not long after resting, a whistle pulled Xia Yuan back to reality, only to see a boat approaching on the relatively flat river. Standing on the bow of the boat was a soldier in yellow military uniform, about 30 years old, holding a jar in his arms. There is a boatman supporting the boat at the stern. It's Wu. No, it's Wuqianli. The plot should have started. Wuqianli should be among those kids. Calm down, Xia Yuan turned his head and saw a group of children running and frolicking along the riverbank, chasing boats on the surface of the river. Among the children was a young man with fluffy hair, dark skin, holding a stone in his hand. The two of them turned around and suddenly threw it, hitting dozens of water floats on the surface of the water and eventually sinking into the water. A beautiful float made over 20 floats and fell steadily into the water. The children cheered warmly in the group. This child has messy hair, a gray and earthy appearance, dark skin, and looks like 15 or 16. His appearance is very familiar. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Wuqianli. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Wuqianli. The plot has already begun. Standing at the bow of the boat, Wuqianli noticed a strange young man sitting on the shore. He appeared to be in his early 20s, with an extraordinary appearance, imposing demeanor, and a large figure. Even while sitting, one could guess that the other person's height was at least 1.8 meters or more. Wuqianli glanced at Xia Yuan standing on the shore and felt the young man's imposing demeanor. However, before he could observe carefully, the group of children on the riverbank threw stones into the boat he was riding on, falling into the water with a clattering sound. One of the stones directly hit the lampshade behind Wuqianli, causing Wuqianli to withdraw his gaze from Xia Yuan and stand up suddenly, almost drawing his gun. With a click, the lampshade glass was shattered, and the shattered glass fell into the water and onto the ship's planks. Wuqianli. You little beheadier. I'll turn around and let your father take care of you. The boatman propped up the boat, pointing his finger at Wuqianli, who was running among the children on the shore, angrily cursing. Wuqianli raised his head and followed the boatman's finger to see a group of playful youths on the shore. One familiar-looking boy asked him to pay more attention. This was not his younger brother, Wuqianli. Lu Shaozi. This flying stone is specifically designed to hit you and tell my father. Wuqianli shouted fearlessly, throwing the stone in his hand. Although he didn't hit Lu Chuanzi, he hit a wooden stick on his head, which really scared Lu Chuanzi a lot. Wuqianli sat at the bow of the boat, looking at the group of playful youths with a smile on his face. He also noticed the young man on the shore, following behind them leisurely, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. The boat slid on the water surface, slowly approaching the ferry on the shore. Wuqianli stood up, turned around to thank him, paid some extra money, and compensated the boatman for the damaged lampshade. Then he shouted at Wuqianli, who was about to run away. 50,000 miles. Wuqianli lowered his head and looked back, only to see that he was a soldier, somewhat unfamiliar but also somewhat familiar. You come over. Wuqianli placed the jar at the bow of the boat and waved to Wuqianli as he got off the boat. Unexpectedly, Wuqianli turned around and kicked the stone under him, which flew out and hit Wuqianli. Wuqianli shrank down and opened his mouth to scold this kid. Before Wuqianli could react, he rushed over at lightning speed and pushed him back with his waist in his arms. I have a gun. I'm scared to death. Wuqianli pressed his head against Wuqianli's belly and caught a glimpse of the pistol at his waist. He lifted his foot and headed straight towards the crucial point under Wuqianli's crotch. Fortunately, Wuqianli reacted quickly enough and quickly moved his lower body behind him. He grabbed Wuqianli's shoulder from behind and said, "It's quite dark." However, Wuqianli's strength was not his opponent at all. After Wuqianli stabilized his figure, he began to counterattack. Xia Yuan stood on the shore, watching his brothers frolic. "Think of something to start with. Let go of me." Wuqianli pressed Wuqianli to the ground, pinching his face with both hands and squeezing his face together. With a doting gaze, he looked at the young man in front of him and said softly, "Baozi, who am I?" Wuqianli's eyes stared blankly at Wuqianli, and a hint of light gradually shone in his eyes. "Brother," he said after speaking, his face changed and he broke free from the constraints of 5,000 miles and ran away directly. Run and shout all the way. "Dad! Mom! Dad! Mom!" Wuqianli's face showed a smile, and he turned back to the ship to pick up the ashes containing Wu Bailey. He held them in his arms and turned around to see Xia Yuan standing on the shore. "What's up with me? I want to join the army and join your team." Xia Yuan walked forward and directly explained his purpose. "The war is over now, there are no more wars to fight," Wuqianli said as he walked, holding the jar. "Go back, war is not for you." Xia Yuan followed Wuqianli in a low voice and said, "A few days ago, I received news of my parents' deaths. They were bombed by American planes while visiting in Anong and died on the spot. The news came back and I didn't eat or drink for 2 days. After dealing with my parents' affairs with the sadness in my heart, I thought of my father's expectations for me. He hoped that I could practice martial arts and serve my country. He looked up at Wuqianli and said, "Like you, I am also from Huzhou. I know there is a great hero here in Huzhou, so I came to inquire about it. I just hope you can accept me and let me join the army." Wuqianli stopped and looked at him. "Did your parents get bombed by American planes in Anton?" Xia Yuan nodded and said, "Yes, you can ask someone in Huzhou. My family runs a martial arts school, which is located in the town. The name of the martial arts school is Zhonghua Martial Arts School." Wuqianli nodded, already believing Xia Yuan's words. "When I went home before, I heard of this martial arts school that teaches the 8 extremes fist. I didn't expect it to be opened by your parents." He thought more in his heart. American planes bombing Anton. He asked again, "How old are you?" Xia Yuan said forcefully, 24, "After my parents died, the martial arts school also disbanded. I sold all my property and donated it to the country without leaving a penny. Only when the country is strong can we protect the people. After dealing with my parents' affairs, I have nothing to ask for. I just hope to go to battle to kill the enemy and protect our country." The words may sound a bit mediocre, but in that passionate era, they were very appealing. As for identity, it is given by the system, and it is clear that the reputation of the Chinese martial arts school is still very high in Huzhou. Wuqianli let out a sigh and carefully glanced at Xia Yuan. Her face is white and pure, like a woman. "Have you ever touched a gun?" "No." Xia Yuan admits to being very clean. "You're connected." The conversation was interrupted. "I have been practicing martial arts since I was young for 19 years. Normally, 3 or 4 people cannot get close. In addition, I throw stones very accurately and very far, so I can serve as a bomber." Speaking, Xia Yuan picked up the stone on the ground, pointed to a bird on the top of a tree in the distance, and threw it forcefully. I saw the stone slide out of a parabola in the sky with a loud thud. Accurately hit the tree trunk under the bird, and the bird on the trunk let out a cry, flapping its wings and flying away. "Be good, this must be 100 meters." Wuqianli's eyes widened in surprise. As a platoon leader, he knew the farthest range for soldiers to throw hand grenades, with a strong horse throwing 40 to 50 meters and a small one holding on for more than 30 meters. It's really rare to throw 100 meters like Xia Yuan. "I'll try your boxing skills." If you can beat me, I'll let you join the army. Wuqianli was already tempted, not to mention his physical skills, but the skill of throwing bombs made him feel a bit tempted. As a platoon leader, he knows the despair of encountering enemy fire points that cannot be attacked for a long time during the charge. Often, such fire points require soldiers to carry explosives and use their lives to fill them. If there is a grenade thrower who can accurately drop the grenade at the firing point, and the throwing distance is over 100 meters, it will be an absolute killer. As for trying his martial arts, to put it simply, I am curious about how good his martial arts are. After all, this kid has a martial arts school at home, and since he is the son of the school owner, his martial arts should be good. Okay. Xia Yuan nodded silently, standing in place like a towering pine tree. If someone who has been practicing martial arts for years were to observe here, they would surely find that Xia Yuan was completely natural and flawless. No loopholes. Wuqianli, who had been following Wuqianli for a long time, also turned back and squatted on the side, playing with 2 stones in his hands, but his gaze was fixed on the 2 of them with a sly expression. It's a bit interesting. Seeing the opponent's posture from Wuqianli, he immediately had the foundation to practice martial arts. He smiled and walked to the roadside, gently placing the jar on the ground. He briefly moved his hands and feet and said, "Kid, pick it up. I'm here, don't let me down. If you can't even beat me, why don't you go home and be your mother?" Xia Yuan was not afraid, but he saw Wuqianli launch an attack first, with a fast speed and a direct attack, targeting Xia Yuan's vital weakness. Xia Yuan's gaze was bright, and he took a diagonal step, exerting force on his heels, walking at his waist, passing through his shoulders, and making a heavy shoulder bump. The first move is the heavy move of Iron Mountain. Wuqianli's character is Wu Jing, who has martial arts skills, and the filming of the movie is more intuitive. At this time, Wuqianli's combat power is very strong, and he can win against the tall and powerful American people. Bang! Wuqianli stumbled back, grinning and feeling a faint pain in his arms. Unexpectedly, he was pushed back by this kid when he met him. Okay. Seeing his elder brother suffer losses, Wuqianli applauded and cheered. Wuqianli moved his slightly painful shoulders, twisted his neck left and right, and grinned. Hey! You're a bit interesting, kid. You're truly someone who has practiced martial arts, but it's different. I'm going to take it seriously. You can take it on. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Recall you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Recall. Xia Yuan could clearly feel the aura emanating from Wuqianli's body. This aura was very sharp, making people dare not look directly at it. It was the killing and decisive aura that only those who had killed had. Wuqianli crawled out of the sea of corpses and blood, and was in charge of the number 110 people. He had experienced battlefield battles, and once he took action, his cold and murderous aura would unconsciously reveal itself. Xia Yuan nodded lightly, his gaze fixed, and his inner thoughts overflowed with words. He didn't even take it too seriously when he started. Although I have practiced the 8 Extremes Fist for over a decade, it is true that there are not many opportunities for practical combat. Even in combat exercises, I am always constrained and afraid of hurting my students with too much force. When performing, the basic moves of the 8 Extremes Fist are performed, and true killing moves are never performed. Wuqianli has truly gone to the battlefield and killed people. Here we go, kid. Wuqianli let out a loud roar, like a tiger howling in the mountains and forests, with all the beasts howling fiercely. This time, the speed was much faster than before, approaching Xia Yuan directly. The target was still the fatal point, and the attack was much more ruthless than before. Xia Yuan had been practicing martial arts since childhood, and his chassis was very stable. Knowing Wuqianli's strength, he decided to take a bold move. This roar did not scare Xia Yuan, but instead startled Wuqianli on the side. Then I saw 5,000 miles rushing straight towards Xia Yuan like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. In the next moment, Xia Yuan dodged the attack from a distance of 5,000 miles on one side of his body. When Wuqianli's attack fell into the air and his body continued to charge forward due to inertia, Xia Yuan bullied him and rushed up, splashing sand and stones at his feet. His body moved rapidly, his shoulders sank, and he leaned back, directly knocking Wuqianli down on the nearby grass. Before Wuqianli could struggle to stand up, Xia Yuan rushed forward with his hands suspended on Wuqianli's forehead. If it were on the battlefield, this punch would have already fallen, with the power of two ordinary adults, either dead or injured. Forgive me. Xia Yuan stood up and pulled Wuqianli, who had fallen on the grass. He felt that Captain Wu had let go, otherwise he wouldn't have won so easily. After all, Wuqianli's skills were all honed killing skills on the battlefield. If he really took action, he probably would lose some of his strength. On the battlefield, being able to kill an enemy at once will never give them a second chance to take action. Wuqianli, who has been fighting for his life since the beginning of the war, is definitely aiming to make the enemy die when he takes action. I lost. I am truly someone who has practiced martial arts for more than 10 years. Not only is my strength amazing, but my reaction is also fast enough. Wuqianli exclaimed, his eyes burning, as if he was looking at a precious lump. Unfortunately, it has not been baptized by gunfire. Otherwise, this slightly flawed jade would have become a beautiful piece of jade after being baptized by gunfire. Brother, you lost. Wuqianli leaned over and said. You kid. I can't beat you well. What's your kid's name? Xia Yuan. I can't beat Xia Yuan, I can't beat you, kid. Let's go home. Wuqianli kicked Wuqianli's buttocks and cursed. Captain Wu, about joining the army? Xia Yuan quickly asked. Agreed. Remember, the 7th Interlude Company of the 239th Regiment. If you dare to run any other company, I will pull you back. Wuqianli picked up the jar on the ground, patted the ash on his buttocks, and turned his head to look at Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan is a treasure that cannot be lost. After returning, let the upper side touch the bottom of this kid. It's clean, and there should be no problem training in the platoon. Yes. Let's go and sit at my house. It's getting late now. Will this disturb the elderly's rest? Are martial arts practitioners still motherly? Wuqianli's home is on a boat, with a length of over 10 meters and a width of 3 meters, which is enough to be a home. Standing at the bow of the boat were two elderly people with gray hair, their faces weathered, and their clothes worn out. Bang dang. The old woman saw Wuqianli in military uniform, and the basin with clothes in her hand suddenly fell to the ground, causing her to sit paralyzed. Wuqianli and his father rushed forward to help the old woman. Come back, just come back. Come in, said Father Wu in an old voice, nodding repeatedly. The position of the cabin was somewhat narrow, and Xia Yuan and Wuqianli did not enter, standing quietly at the entrance of the ship. Wuqianli walked in, gently put down the jar, and knelt down with a thud. His slightly cracked lips wriggled and he said, Dad, Mom. My head slammed heavily on the wooden planks of the ship, tears dripping onto the planks. I didn't take good care of the boss. Xia Yuan withdrew his gaze, feeling a bit heavy in his heart. He walked up to the bow of the boat and sat down, staring absent-mindedly at the fishing boat on the river. What move did you use to defeat my brother just now? Wuqianli walked up to Xia Yuan and squatted down. Iron Mountain in Baji Fist. Xia Yuan glanced at Wuqianli, who was disheveled and covered in dirt. With a celebrity face on his face, he suddenly became interested and said, Do you want to learn? Wuqianli nodded and said, Of course, your move is very powerful. My brother is not even your opponent. Xia Yuan shook his head and said, Practicing martial arts is very difficult. I have been practicing it myself for 14 years. Starting from the horse stance, one stance lasts for 2 years, and your brother is leaving tomorrow. I also have to join the army with him. I can't teach you so much in one night. My brother is leaving. Where are we going? Wuqianli was somewhat surprised. Your brother is just going home to visit relatives. He's a company commander and there are still over 100 people to see. He can't stay at home all the time, can he? Yuan did not tell Wuqianli that the Americans were about to attack, and your brother was going on another expedition. He has watched the movie and knows about the development afterwards, but there are many details that he has not actually memorized clearly. Resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea, defend our country. War is too cruel. Wuqianli remained silent and turned to look at the figures inside the cabin, unsure of what was on his mind. As the sky gradually darkened, Wuqianli walked up to the bow of the ship and said, "The meal will be ready soon. Do you want to drink some wine?" Yuan hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's forget about it. Drinking alcohol can cause trouble." Captain Wu said, "Drink a little, it's okay." Yuan pursed her lips and said, "That's okay." At night, the fishermen were brightly lit, casting a fiery red light on the riverbank. In the cabin, after saying hello to Wu's father and mother, Yuan sat aside and watched quietly as his father and mother, who were 5,000 miles away, finished their sacrifice for 500 miles. Watching a movie only made him feel heartbroken, but when this scene really happened before him, Yuan felt very uncomfortable and felt like a lump was blocking his heart. It was precisely these children from each family who formed a team to drive away the invaders that led to the birth of an Eastern dragon. Every scale on this giant dragon is a reflection of the small families who have sacrificed their lives and lives for the sake of national righteousness. In that era, they never thought about winning future wars, but still sacrificed their lives and shed their blood for that unattainable dream. Drink some wine. Wuqianli picked up a wine jar from the cabin and poured a small bowl for Yuan. Captain Xie. The platoon leader's name is Comfortable. After dinner, the three of them lay in the cabin. Yuan, you are a martial arts practitioner. Go back and teach the brothers of the 7th Company some hand and foot skills. Wuqianli was wearing a white shirt, with his head resting on his arm. No problem, I'm the best at this. Yuan nodded. Wuqianli touched Wuqianli and said, "Let me take a look at the gun." Wuqianli took off his matching gun and caressed it in his hand. Yuan looked at it with straight eyes. Born in a peaceful era, he was too far away from the gun, and this was also his first time seeing a real gun. This type of gun is the Mauser pistol, also known as the box gun, bulge gun, or box gun. Wuqianli couldn't help but reach out to pick it up. Wuqianli suddenly withdrew his hand and said, "Don't point a gun at anyone." After finishing speaking, he handed the gun to Wuqianli. Excitedly, Wuqianli took the pistol and aimed it in front of him. After spinning around, he actually aimed at Wuqianli. Wuqianli stood up and grabbed Wuqianli's arm. With a sudden tug, Wuqianli almost fell to the ground. "Tell you not to point a gun at people." Yuan happily watched the two brothers playing and frolicking on the side. When watching a movie, he didn't feel anything, only when it really happened by his own side would he find it very interesting. Order from the headquarters of the 9th Corps. At this moment, a hurried sound came from a distance, accompanied by the sound of hooves moving from far to near, startling the small fishing village in front of us. Wuqianli and Yuan quickly got up and rushed to the wooden bridge. In the distance, there were several soldiers riding horses and wielding torches, pulling the reins with unusually loud voices. The headquarters of the 9th Corps orders that everyone has them. Who is 5,000 miles away? Arrive! Wuqianli shouted in response. Those people stopped at the bridge and said, "In case of emergency, stop visiting and return at dawn." "Yes." Wuqianli replied. This sudden emergency caught Wuqianli off guard. Another war. Xia Yuan stood beside Wuqianli. Maybe. Wuqianli turned around and was lying at the bow of the boat watching the two of them. Brother, Wuqianli ignored Wuqianli and took 3 steps in 2. He bent back to the cabin and looked up, both of them stunned. Under the dim kerosene light, my parents were in front of the cabin window, lifting the curtains and staring blankly at the children who were about to return, with a wrinkled face filled with worry and reluctance. End of this chapter. Chapter 4, Chapter 7 Interlude, for collection, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4, Chapter 7 Interlude, for collection, there was nothing to say overnight. The next morning, Xia Yuan and Wuqianli packed up. Actually, neither of them had much to pack. When Xia Yuan came, he didn't bring anything and shamelessly came over. I will come back at the beginning of spring and build a house for you, Wuqianli assured the 2 elderly people as he stood at the bow of the boat. Xia Yuan is waiting on the side, and he will also follow Wuqianli, join the 7th Company, become a glorious volunteer soldier, and rush to the Korean battlefield. Wuqianli followed Wuqianli and jumped onto the ship, his eyes burning as he looked at him. I want to go to war with you. Big brother said, we've fought all the battles we should have fought and won't let you fight. Wuqianli walked up to Wuqianli and patted his shoulder, then pinched Wuqianli's face together and said, Baozi, wait for me to come back. After speaking, he pushed away 50,000 miles and waved to the boatman. Wuqianli stood at the bow of the boat, looking straight at his parents and Wuqianli sitting at the bow of the boat, until the boat went further and further. Captain, don't worry too much, we'll be back soon. Xia Yuan stepped forward to comfort him, but of course, this kind of comfort didn't have much effect because he knew that the situation would escalate. In the end, Wuqianli, this little guy, secretly followed and even stopped Commander Song's car. No one can predict the situation on the battlefield, bullets don't have eyes. Wuqianli's expression was complex. He didn't know about this mission yet, but judging from the recall status, the situation was probably already very bad. Xia Yuan nodded silently. The family visit was recalled, and there was still 1 day left before heading to the battlefield. Along the way, the 2 of them chatted about everything and soon arrived. 7th Interlude Company Temporary Base. Wuqianli took Xia Yuan by boat and waded along the river. In the 7th Interlude, Xia Yuan saw familiar faces, including Pingy, Yutsongrong, and Lei Dada. Yo, platoon leader, when you go back to visit your family, you bring over a new recruit egg. Why does it look like a girl? Yutsongrong, who was sitting beside him wiping his gun, looked up and suddenly felt happy. However, he saw a young man with a fair face beside their platoon leader. Although he was not short, he was white and had a scholarly demeanor, like a woman. The clothes they were wearing were very clean, and the styles they had never seen before were very expensive at first glance. A burst of laughter echoed from the platoon. Wuqianli smiled and said, Don't cause trouble, kid. If you suffer losses, don't come to me. He has tried Xia Yuan's skills, not even against himself, let alone Yutsongrong. Upon hearing these words, Yutsongrong smiled and said, Are you at a loss? Captain, I'm afraid of being at a loss. Alright, Yutsongrong, take him to change clothes. The others gather their equipment and prepare to gather. Wuqianli ignored this kid and found out when he was beaten. On the way back, he had already received news that the team was about to set off as a whole, but the situation was very urgent. Mother, come with me, I'll take you to change clothes first. Yutsongrong stood up from the side and his gaze fell on Xia Yuan's clothes. Your clothes look very expensive. Can I find a place for you to store them? Forget it, put on your military uniform and find a place to sell these clothes. When you go to the battlefield, even the best clothes will be in vain. Do you still know how to go to the battlefield and touch a gun? Yutsongrong chuckled happily. Xia Yuan nodded and shook his head, I've seen it, but I haven't touched it. Yu Tsongrong. Yu Tsongrong. Where are you? Have you changed your clothes? Hurry up. Let's go. What else did Yu Tsongrong want to say? There were voices from 5,000 miles outside. Yu Tsongrong threw his clothes to Xia Yuan and said, hurry up and change. We're leaving. Xia Yuan acted very quickly, undressing and putting on clothes. In less than a minute, he changed his clothes, grabbed his own clothes, and followed Yu Tsongrong's footsteps back to the line. The autumn wind is bleak, with a hint of coolness. A large number of troops have already gathered on the street. The 9th Corps of the 3rd Field Army entered North Korea, but there were as many as 150,000 people, which is an unimaginable number. Soldiers were everywhere on the streets, and people gathered on both sides, holding banners, beating gongs and drums, to bid farewell to the People's Army. Unlike what is portrayed in the movie, reality is a sea of people, with children running around on the streets. Women take out their own food and drink from their homes, hold them in a basket, and push them into the arms of the soldiers. Not long after the founding of the People's Republic of China, the military and civilian fish and water situation has reached a peak. Ladies, come here. This is Lei Gong, Lei platoon leader, Lei dad, Lei mom. This is Pingy. Our company's sniper has very accurate marksmanship. In the team, Yu Tsongrong pulled Xia Yuan and introduced him to the other soldiers in the team. In front of him was a rugged middle-aged man, who, despite his advanced age, still exuded a majestic aura that remained the same as before. Pingy, on the other hand, remained silent and didn't say much, which was completely opposite to the personality of Yu Tsongrong. Xia Yuan greeted them one by one, and Lei Gong responded. Pingy just nodded lightly. After introducing the others, Yu Tsongrong looked at Xia Yuan and said, young ladies, what's your name? How old are you this year? You look really beautiful, with delicate skin and tender flesh. Ha ha ha. The 7 company warriors laughed heartily. For Yu Tsongrong's provocation, Xia Yuan didn't take it to heart. He remembered the sentence in the movie, you're afraid the veterans won't accept you. Only when you're on the battlefield will you know if they will accept you. People in this era have very pure and even clean thoughts. They are willing to sacrifice their lives for what they believe. Xia Yuan, 24, practiced martial arts. Xia Yuan still answered Yu Tsongrong's words honestly. Yo, after practicing martial arts, you still look so white. Are you lazy and haven't practiced well? Yu Tsongrong smiled. Are you stealing or being lazy? Let's try it later. Xia Yuan's skin is not as white as expected, but compared to these soldiers who have been baptized by gunfire, his face is surprisingly white. Yoha, it's quite tough. When we get to the station later, let's try it out. Yu Tsongrong laughed heartily. Quickly, the troops arrived at the designated gathering point, which was a huge square where a large number of platoons had gathered, with a population of over 20,000, densely gathering on the square. Wuqianli arrived with a team, attracting the attention of many people. The 7th Interlude is a heroic team, and Wuqianli is also a battle hero. He led the platoon to a relatively open position and turned his head to shout to Yu Tsongrong, you gather here first. Yu Tsongrong, Xia Yuan will be under your firepower. Before departure, the company entry ceremony will be held. Upon hearing this, Yu Tsongrong immediately quit. Ah, no, platoon leader. Our firepower platoon doesn't need women, I don't want them. You kid, don't you know I'll give you a piece of treasure? Alright, if you don't want it, I'll give Lei Gong's cannon platoon. Unexpectedly, Lei Gongdao said, no, I don't lack people here. Wuqianli glanced at the two of them and chuckled, hey, I said you guys, Lao Lei. This kid is a genius at shooting. Are you sure you don't want him? The two shook their heads. Yu Tsongrong said, Captain, this kid looks like a woman. He hasn't even touched a gun before. Going to the battlefield is not about risking his life. If you want to take him with you, just take him with you. Xia Yuan, come here. Wuqianli waved to Xia Yuan. Company commander. Xia Yuan walked over and glanced at Yu Tsongrong and Lei Gong. You can follow Captain Yu from Rong Yu first. If there's anything you don't agree with, just beat him up. I approve, said Wuqianli. Captain Yu, I have offended you so much. Xia Yuan grinned and had long wanted to beat up this guy. Taking a sudden diagonal step, one foot was extended under Yu Tsongrong's crotch, and his big hand grabbed one of his arms. The sole of his foot exerted force to rotate his entire body, placing Yu Tsongrong's arm on his shoulder. An over-shoulder fall caused Yu Tsongrong to fall to the ground. The action was completed in one go, without any dragging or dragging. Yu Tsongrong only felt the sky and earth spinning, and when he regained his senses, he found himself lying on the ground. Looking at the playful faces around him, Yu Tsongrong felt a bit confused and didn't know how he came over. How about you joining the military? You're not convinced. This kid even fucks me down. Don't even talk about you. He has been practicing martial arts for more than 10 years, and although he looks clean, if he really wants to kill me, even if it's you, I have to lie down. Wuqianli poked his head and looked at Yu Tsongrong lying on the ground, with a smile on his face. Be good, you really can't judge a person by their appearance. Yu Tsongrong shook his head and stood up, staring at Xia Yuan's young face. This time doesn't count, I wasn't even prepared just now. Come again, I need to be serious. Unexpectedly, Xia Yuan didn't give him a chance to speak and took another diagonal step, as if he was about to repeat his old trick. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Dogs Fighting Against Human Power. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Dogs Fighting Against Human Power. Yu Tsongrong had just experienced an over-shoulder fall, so he was well prepared and immediately hid his hand behind him. With a grin on his face, he said, I can't catch it anymore. But then there was a flash in front of me, my chest trembled slightly, and I was knocked out, along with 3 warriors. Xia Yuan, who had a stable figure, looked at Yu Tsongrong with a grin on his face and arched his hand, saying, I have offended you so much. Hiss! Yu Tsongrong grinned, feeling a burning sensation in his chest, and this thrust caught him off guard. Take it, take it. You truly have practiced martial arts, I underestimated you before. Yu Tsongrong stood up straight and awkwardly arched his hand, saying. The soldiers of the 7th Company let out a sigh. After practicing martial arts for more than 10 years, no wonder Yu Tsongrong is not your opponent. He is powerful. Such talents have been buried in our artillery platoon, so we should follow Yu Tsongrong to fight against the enemy. Lei Gong looked at Xia Yuan with a bright light in his eyes, full of surprises. No wonder Wuqianli wanted him to join the company. With this skill, he would definitely not lose out on bayonets. Although he was envious of this good seedling, he understood better that such a person should be able to play the maximum role in the firepower platoon. Yu Tsongrong rubbed his chest and pressed his face very thick, saying, I just said, how could you possibly be a girl? Come back and teach me 2 moves. The other soldiers of the 7th Company looked at Yu Tsongrong with a smile on their faces. Pingyi remained silent, his gaze lingering a little longer on Xia Yuan. Okay. Xia Yuan nodded. Shit, I'm still waiting for him to teach us the soldiers of the 7th Company. You have to take care of him. Wuqianli gave Yu Tsongrong a glare and said, Pingyi, take a few people with me to get a gun. There are still many platoons gathering outside, and with such a large scale gathering of troops, there is no need to guess that war is about to break out, so there are naturally many weapons and equipment needed. After walking 5,000 miles, Yu Tsongrong asked happily, Xia Yuan, what kind of boxing did you practice? Xia Yuan did not conceal it, I am practicing the 8 Extremes Fist, and my ancestors are descendants of the 8 Extremes Fist. The descendant of the 8 Extremes Fist, that's amazing, said a soldier, poking his head. Go on the side. Yu Tsongrong slapped the boy and said, "No wonder you're so aggressive. Lei Gong, why don't you also come and give it a try?" Lei Gong glanced at Xia Yuan and his hand felt a little itchy. "Come on, I'll give it a try too." "Don't do it, right?" Xia Yuan still has great respect for Lei Gong, and at the end of the movie, he still has some doubts about Lei Gong's death. Mother-in-law, she's still a martial arts practitioner. Come and practice. Lei Gong glared at Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan smiled bitterly, but he still liked to say that Wuqianli truly deserves to be taught by Duke Lei. He had to nod and stand up, standing in place without any flaws. He still looked at Lei Gong with unease and said, "Lei platoon leader, you have no eyes, be careful." "I know, come on." Lei Gong smiled. "Platoon leader Lei, come on. Xia Yuan, lead the thunderstorm squadron." Who just said that? Ha ha ha. The soldiers of the 7th Company quickly made way for a piece of open space for them, and the scene quickly became lively. In no time, there were layers inside and outside. Even people from other companies gathered around to watch the excitement. "Captain Lei, I'm here." As the words fell, Xia Yuan stepped on his feet and the two tendons on his thighs were like two springs, tightening and bouncing, and he shot out like a sharp arrow. "So fierce, I'll just talk." Faced with the fierce Xia Yuan, Lei Paichang was surprised and quickly made a response, but there were many loopholes. Xia Yuan's eyes were sharp, and he seized the loophole. He wielded a machete and swung it horizontally, chopping on the arm of Lei Paichang. Lei Gong only felt a slight numbness in his arm. He was at least a warrior who had been fighting on the battlefield for many years. Just as Xia Yuan hit him, he disregarded being hit in the arm and wanted to open his arms to embrace Xia Yuan. He wanted to use his own advantages to overpower Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan keenly caught Lei Gong's movements, lightly curled the corner of his mouth, dodged sideways, and punched Lei Gong's soft rib. Lei Gong felt a numbness in his waist and collapsed to the ground. "I've accepted it." Xia Yuan stood up and arched his hand. With just a few touches, he understood the details of Lei Gong. The opponent did not exert all his strength, and he did not use the 8 extremes fist. He only used the simplest way to deal with it. Neither of them put in their full effort, and the outcome quickly became clear. "Oh!" The soldiers burst into a burst of cheers. This kind of battle is very clean and agile, without so many flashy moves. But it is very ornamental. Although Xia Yuan has never engaged in actual combat, he has fought many simulated battles. When he was a child, he fought with his grandfather every day, and as he grew up, he was abused by his father every day. He learned a lot of various boxing techniques and dodge moves. What he learned was not just acting, but the authentic 8 extremes fist, which was a true killing technique. However, in times of peace, martial arts are not as turbulent as before. Gradually, martial arts have become simplified into a routine, and true killing skills have gradually been lost in the long river of history. "Amazing, you're a slippery kid. I'm not your opponent, Yu Tsongrong. You need to stay in your firepower platoon with such good skills to fully utilize them. However, I also want to know if you're interested in joining the artillery platoon." Lei Gong stood up supported by Xia Yuan and rubbed his waist. Yu Tsongrong widened his eyes and said horizontally, "That's not possible." The platoon leader said, "Let Xia Yuan join my firepower platoon." I didn't know who said, "Don't come," just now. I don't know who caused the chaos in the crowd and shouted. Yu Tsongrong suddenly became anxious, staring at a pair of cowbell-sized eyes and saying, who said not to come? Who am I in a hurry with? Ha ha ha. Yu Tsongrong hugged Xia Yuan's precious lump and pointed at the people around him, arrogantly saying, "Who else is not satisfied? Come and do it today, one by one. Xia Yuan promises to make the clothes you make comfortable. You kid, it's not like a dog wielding power. Wuqianli quickly brought back a few guns with his people, and just walked up to Yu Tsongrong's side with one foot. Xia Yuan grinned and watched this scene with joy, which was always different from what was portrayed in movies. In movies, they played characters. In my own eyes, they are actually living people one by one. Yu Tsongrong, who was kicked, scratched his head. Wuqianli turned his head to look at Xia Yuan and patted his shoulder. I reckon we're going to war, are you afraid? Xia Yuan shook his head and said, I'm not afraid. People who practice martial arts are not afraid of this statement. Wuqianli smiled and said, that's okay. I didn't originally plan to let you go. Halfway through, the somewhat noisy square instantly quieted down, and the crowd separated on a road. A military jeep drove over and stopped steadily in front of the 7th Interlacing Company. After turning his head for 5,000 miles, Yu Tsongrong quickly grabbed Xia Yuan and said, come here. Xia Yuan took a deep breath and stood next to Yu Tsongrong, his gaze fixed on the figure sitting in the jeep, feeling a little excited inside. Commander Song, commander and political commissar of the 9th Corps of the Volunteer Army. A dark-skinned soldier, time has carved grooves on his face, and his whole body exudes a majestic aura from the inside out. Stand at attention. The neat steps made the ground tremble slightly. Wuqianli saluted and shouted in the loudest voice, report to the commander, I am Wuqianli, the 7th platoon leader. I know you, the combat hero of our 9th Corps. Your 7th company is very famous, known as the 7th Interpenetrating Company. The party committee of the Corps was supposed to issue a flag to your 7th company, but I think it will wait until after the war. Yes. Salute. The uniform salute, Xia Yuan's salute was not standard, but he also worked hard to lift his chest, raise his arms, and his eyes were burning. Commander Song meticulously walked up the platform and looked down at the young faces below. After the ceremony, the neat voice made Xia Yuan's new trend surge, and he calmed down a bit, with the voice of Commander Song floating in his ear. He was thinking that if he didn't do something in advance when he traveled to this world, he would be too sorry for his identity as a traveler. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Unable to change the big picture, start from the small picture. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Unable to change the big picture, start changing from the small picture. Captain, look. After Commander Song left, Xia Yuan pointed to Wuqianli in the distance. Wuqianli turned his head and immediately froze in place when he saw Wuqianli's stunned and green head. The teacher brought Wuqianli to his side and said, he is the little ghost mentioned by the commander. He said he is Wuqianli's younger brother, and now I will hand him over to your 7th company. Yes. Who dares not answer from 5,000 miles away? Xia Yuan looked at Wuqianli with a smile on his face and extended a thumb. Wuqianli secretly gave Xia Yuan a glance, and just as he was about to laugh, he was grabbed by Wuqianli and pulled away. Before leaving, I didn't forget to tell you to bring back the 7th company. This is 5,000 miles. Watching Wuqianli tug at Wuqianli's back, the teacher shook his head. Report. The commander turned his head and saw an unfamiliar little warrior. Report to the division commander, I am a new recruit from the 7th Interception Company. My name is Xia Yuan. The commander left in a hurry, and he didn't dare to stop him rashly. After all, blocking the commander's car might result in being shot. Xia Yuan didn't want to try with his own life. Since blocking the commander was risky, he planned to change his target. Even the comrade in front of him, the division commander, has no guards around him, so it shouldn't be a problem to talk to him directly. Now the team is starting to disband. Xia Yuan seized this opportunity and quickly came to the teacher's side. There was no one accompanying the teacher, and he looked quite friendly. Do you have anything to do? Commander, just now the commander mentioned that we are going to resist the United States and aid North Korea. I know North Korea. Before joining the army, I just returned from there not long ago. The Dog-Day American Emperor crossed the 38th parallel, and when I left, there was chaos and the sound of airplanes could be heard everywhere. If it were to fight in North Korea, our clothes would not be able to help the soldiers fight against the weather there. Xia Yuan gritted his head and continued to weave. The lowest temperature there can be as low as -40 degrees Celsius, which can freeze people to death. I see that most of the soldiers are still wearing autumn clothing. Such equipment is likely to be frostbitten by the severe cold before even the shadow of the U.S. Emperor can be seen when entering the court for combat. In reality, the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea is indeed confidential. Many soldiers of the 9th Corps also learned about it by taking trains and arriving in northeast China. However, this is a plot from the movie. I just watched it carefully. At 27 minutes and 8 seconds, Commander Song swore his oath. We have just achieved national victory, and the benches under our buttocks have not yet heated up. The special American imperialism is in North Korea, launching a war in an attempt to bring the flames of war to our newly born new China. This is the plot from the movie. Since it is in the movie, we will follow the movie. After the Battle of Changjin Lake and Shuimen ends, I will write about the war to resist U.S. aggression. Other battles during the Korean aid period. The commander furrowed his brow and didn't expect a young soldier who had returned from North Korea to be in the team. He sighed and said, I know the bad weather in North Korea, but the Korean War is urgent. The cotton coats have been sent to the station on the troop transport route, where you will get them. You don't have to worry, just set off with peace of mind. After saying this, he turned around and left. Xia Yuan furrowed his brow tightly. Having watched movies and been familiar with the Korean War, he was well aware that despite being prepared for it, a large number of volunteer soldiers were still frostbitten or even killed. It wasn't until Yu Tsongrong came over that he regained his senses and said, You kids scared me. Xia Yuan turned around and followed Yu Tsongrong's side. I was going to stop the commander's car, which scared you. Yu Tsongrong was surprised and said, Don't have such thoughts. If you stop, it's all over. Even if it's over, we have to stop it. Xia Yuan looked at him and said, resisting the United States and aiding North Korea, aiding North Korea. In North Korea, it's -40 degrees Celsius, and even a single sip of saliva can turn into ice. In such weather, our clothes are thin and we can't resist for long. We're going to Korea. Isn't it to liberate Ryukyu? We went to North Korea, not Ryukyu. The weather there was very bad, and I came to see our division commander because of this. We were wearing thin clothes, and we probably didn't see the enemy before lying down. Yu Tsongrong's eyes widened and he said, Is the weather over there really so bad? Besides, freezing your toes is not a problem. Xia Yuan sighed, only he who came from the future knew the hardships of the Korean War. But there seems to be no way, even if he crosses over a week in advance, it won't change anything. The bad weather in North Korea is well known to the teachers, but the war in North Korea is urgent and time is too tight. Cotton jackets need to be supported from all over the country, which requires a lot of time. However, the deployment of troops is imminent, and even if the train reaches a station from 5,000 miles in the movie, cotton jackets are still not enough. It will take another 2 or 3 days, but the U.S. reconnaissance planes have already flown overhead, forcing them to accelerate their journey and board the vehicle hastily. Commander Song's 9th Army belonged to the Southern Expeditionary Force. Compared to other troops that entered North Korea for combat, the 9th Army entered North Korea in a very hasty manner, with many supplies not brought along. The basic food was fried noodles and boiled potatoes, without even processing the outer skin. Xia Yuan, after trying, can only understand the sense of powerlessness that cannot be changed when he truly arrives in such a world. Boarding the train was imminent, but Lei Gong had not seen Yu Tsongrong for a long time. Looking back, he found that Yu Tsongrong and Xia Yuan were following behind the queue, even falling out of the queue. He shouted to the two of them. Yu Tsongrong. Xia Yuan. Follow me. I'll talk to the platoon leader about this later. Yu Tsongrong touched the clothes on his body and it was indeed very thin. At the train station, there is a closed-tank military train parked with its carriages open, and platoons are transporting supplies onto the train. A military jeep in the crowd kept spreading its voice, "Supplies board," accelerating the soldiers' pace of transporting supplies. Xia Yuan carried an ammunition box and walked briskly, with 2 points of strength equivalent to the strength of 2 adults. In such an era, it was enough to knock down anyone. How about it, tired or not? Lei Gong stood on the stuffy carriage, grabbing the ammunition box from Xia Yuan and throwing it to a soldier inside the carriage, looking at Xia Yuan with a happy expression on his face. Compared to practicing martial arts, this is nothing. Xia Yuan exhaled gently, his gaze scanning the station. Everywhere were volunteers wearing military uniforms, transporting supplies back and forth on the train. The ammunition box is full of bullets, as well as a long food bag containing flour and potatoes. The unit where the 7th Interception Company is located is Commander Song's 9th Corps, and most of the units are still undergoing training in Shandong. The soldiers who received the orders were somewhat caught off guard and rushed to the Korean battlefield without even changing their cotton clothes, which also laid the groundwork for the later war. The severe cold weather caused volunteer soldiers to be frostbitten or even frozen to death without even seeing the enemy, and their weapons and equipment also had problems. Most of the weapons and equipment were Japanese-style equipment from the anti-Japanese war, and the -40°C weather caused many weapons and equipment to have problems. A series of crucial issues include the inability of hand grenades to explode, the deformation of the gun barrel due to freezing, the inability of soldiers to hold the gun, the inability to pull the bolt, and the severe shortage of food. But it was in this situation that the soldiers of the volunteer army relied on their tenacious fighting spirit, fearless bravery, and fearlessness to defeat the well-equipped and absolute air superiority of the U.S. military. Looking back on these, Xia Yuan's mood began to stir as he watched the bustling battle of transporting ammunition in front of him. Although I cannot change the overall situation, the 7th interweaving of some people's destinies requires me to change. Taking a deep breath, Xia Yuan infiltrated the crowd and continued to transport ammunition. In no time, Wuqianli led Wuqianli over. Xia Yuan. Wuqianli's eyes lit up when he saw Xia Yuan transporting ammunition. They had dinner together, chatted, stayed overnight, and also had some feelings. Call me Brother Yuan, no big or small. Wuqianli gave him a glare and was still angry about this kid sneaking out. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. For the next generation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 For the next generation. Wanli followed over no matter what. Xia Yuan saw 50,000 miles and leaned in to speak. This kid sneaked out. Wuqianli stared at Wuqianli and said to Xia Yuan, take him to carry ammunition. Don't be afraid of tiring him. He has been living on fishing boats since childhood, and the most fearless thing is to endure hardship. Let's go. Xia Yuan smiled and looked at Wuqianli. Wuqianli, dressed in military uniform, was quite handsome. After all, he was played by a celebrity, even though his skin was relatively dark, his foundation was still strong. Carrying a box of ammunition, Wuqianli couldn't help but ask, Brother Yuan, when will you teach me Kung Fu? Xia Yuan restrained his expression and said, war is about to break out. It's too late. We're going to set off tonight. When the war is won, I'll teach you. Yo, it's new again, Xia Yuan. Who is he? Yu Tsongrong had many grain sticks hanging on his body, and he approached from a distance. His eyes occasionally scanned 50,000 miles and said, so small, your brother. Don't talk nonsense, this is the platoon leader's brother, 50,000 miles away. Xia Yuan placed the ammunition box on the stuffy carriage and turned around to look. The supplies have been moved almost, and it's getting dark. The tile shed lights under the station emit a faint yellow light. Yoha. 7 consecutive sets. The whistle interrupted Yu Tsongrong's words, and the originally noisy train platform quieted down. Various platoons began to gather and walk towards the station platform. Xia Yuan stood behind the team with 50,000 li, following them to the train station. 121. 121. Everywhere was the sound of shouting slogans, and the echoes drifted in a distant direction. The neat footsteps stirred the hearts of the two new recruits, Xia Yuan and Wuqianli. The two of them had no guns on their bodies and had not officially joined the team yet. They were learning the footsteps of the soldiers around them in an orderly manner. Bang! The red flare took off, as if opening a signal, and from afar came the cry of "standing still." Wuqianli was startled and looked up. "Are you scared?" "A bit." Xia Yuan and Wuqianli looked around like curious babies, looking up at the bullets fired from the red illuminated signal gun, chatting in a low voice. 3 companies were supposed to have 141 people, but in reality there were 130 people. The rest are on their way back. The artillery battalion should have 258 people, but it actually has 221 people. The sound of continuous counting came from a distance, and Xia Yuan turned his head to look at the nearby battalion. It was an artillery battalion, with twice the number of people compared to the 7th Interlude. The voice of Wuqianli also came from the front of the team. The 7th Interlude should reach 158 people. Actually. Report. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by a more powerful voice. A soldier riding on a 28-bar shouted loudly as he rode, "Commander Mei Sheng of the 7th Interception Company is back." The 7th Interlude should have reached 158 people, but it actually reached 158 people. The voice from Wuqianli once again came. "Join the ranks." Mei Sheng rode the 38th parallel to the team and stood it up. "Yes." Xia Yuan looked at Mei Sheng, the 7th instructor in a row, with clear eyebrows and handsome eyes, and a bookish expression on his face. Don't underestimate the scholar. When he went to the battlefield, he was not ambiguous at all and was extremely fierce. "Captain, I want to pee." Just as he was thinking, Wuqianli beside him lifted his head and shouted. The soldiers of the 7th Company burst into laughter as Wuqianli turned to look at his younger brother and said, "Speak and shout for a report, you pee and solve it on the spot." Wuqianli touched Xia Yuan beside him with his hand and said, "Brother Yuan, are you going?" Xia Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Report, I'll go to the restroom too." Wuqianli had just walked up to Mei Sheng's side and turned back, "Go." The two of them found a corner and came back after urinating, with people everywhere. They climbed up a high platform and looked down at the entire station. The green military tent was erected on the platform, and the stuffy tank military trains were parked in front of the platform one after another. Yu Tsongrong, who was under the line, grabbed the 3 or 8 large bars and rode up crookedly. A few soldiers who wanted to ride followed him, and 2 or 3 soldiers from the firepower platoon supported him. The others looked curiously. In no time, I heard Yu Tsongrong's voice coming. "Captain, I will do it. Don't move, go aside." From time to time, laughter could be heard in the platoon. The orange light reflected everything in front of us, so harmonious. There was still some time before boarding the car, and the soldiers were all idle and gathered together, speaking dialects from different places and chatting in different languages. Xia Yuan stood on the high platform and asked, "What do you think? You secretly ran over with me, so you're not afraid of your brother beating you?" "He doesn't know." Wuqianli looked around with dark skin, feeling everything was so novel. If it weren't for Wuqianli, he would probably have followed his parents to fish for the rest of his life. At this moment, the wheel of history changed, and after experiencing the transformation of the battlefield, he would have become a qualified volunteer soldier. It's all for the sake of protecting our country. Why can he do it, but I can't? Wuqianli said somewhat stubbornly. Protecting our country comes at a cost. Knowing the changes in the future, Xia Yuan felt a bit sad in his heart, and he was not sure if he could survive this war. "I'm not afraid," my brother said, "if they finish the battle, they won't let me fight. That's not acceptable. I can't hold my brother back. They can do it, and I can do it too." Wuqianli shook his head. Xia Yuan looked at Wuqianli's dark face and suddenly remembered the video of interviewing anti-Japanese war veterans decades later. Everyone is not afraid to go to the battlefield, but when the horn rings, they are not afraid. Everyone is charging, and no one is afraid. Our generation has eaten all the bitterness we should have, so the next generation doesn't have to eat anymore. They are all striving for the next generation. Wu Beili and Wuqianli are for Wuqianli, and those countless volunteer soldiers are for future generations. War should not be forgotten. While remembering history, we should also remember the predecessors who sacrificed themselves for our generation. As that person said, immortality. We're leaving, we're about to depart. Standing on the high platform, Xia Yuan looked at the soldiers below, and his inner fear was dispersed. Wuqianli said, "I want to watch for a while longer." Xia Yuan patted the boy's shoulder and said earnestly, "Join the army, and you'll have to take away those petty traits. The duty of a soldier is to obey orders. Your brother doesn't want to watch a street wanderer enter the team." Wuqianli thought for a moment and followed Xia Yuan down the platform, standing behind the 7th Company's team. After resting for a while, I blew the assembly whistle again. The teacher stood in the distance, holding a loudspeaker and shouting, "Everyone board! Everyone board!" A loud and resounding response from the crowd. "Yes. Get in the car." The volunteer soldiers carrying guns rushed into the sealed compartments divided by each platoon, without dragging mud or hesitation. Being in the military ranks means stepping onto the battlefield, and Xia Yuan's entire mood is very excited. Xia Yuan followed the soldiers of the 7th Company into the carriage. The soldiers below put away the wooden pedals, and the stuffy jar army made a loud and resounding sound, slowly starting with a clang 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 clang. The soldiers responsible for standing guard and leaving on the platform paid the highest respect, and the orange lights fell on them, looking so unreal. The soldiers in the carriage saluted and said, "I don't know how many people will die there. There is no such thing as sacrificing in battle. They love their country deeply, sacrifice their lives, and shed their blood without hesitation." Xia Yuan watched this scene quietly, without realizing it, and then watched it again as a person from the movie. It wasn't until the train started running and the strong wind blew in from the pushed-open door, causing pain in his cheeks like a knife. They finally closed the door of the carriage. There are only 2 yellow lights inside the carriage for illumination, and the relatively spacious carriage is decorated with beds on the upper, middle, and lower floors, with idle areas piled up with weapons and ammunition. Wuqianli sat on the ammunition box, looking around, while Xia Yuan found the bed of his firepower platoon. Yuan was teaching Xia Yuan to tie his own bedding, which was to be taken to the battlefield. After all, he had to rest at night, and Xia Yuan was also a new recruit. Coupled with being accepted by them early, Yuan was still very concerned about Xia Yuan. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Hanging Collapse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Hanging Collapse. After teaching for a while, Yuan lets Xia Yuan practice on his own. Binding this thing is still very simple, you can practice it yourself. Speaking, he took out a handful of melon seeds from his pocket and stuffed them into Xia Yuan's hand. Where did it come from? Xia Yuan looked at the melon seeds. Where did you get it? It was bought. Was it still snatched? Xia Yuan, you're really interesting. You wouldn't be foolish to practice martial arts. Yuan's eyes widened and he grabbed some and stuffed it into his hand. Don't be foolish anymore, I promise you will be very happy. Xia Yuan looked at Yuan with a smile on his face. Don't be against you, I'm not happy at all. Upon hearing this, Yu Tsongrong waved his hand repeatedly, jokingly saying that it was enough to throw away the person once, and not a second time. The soldiers around them, however, don't mind the bigger things. They spoke in a strong local accent. Captain Yu, what are you afraid of? Go and give it a try, I'll cheer you on. You kid, if you try, I'll cheer you up too. I won't go. Yu Tsongrong glared at the soldier speaking and lay down on his own bed, eating melon seeds and starting to look at 50,000 miles. Xia Yuan learned how to tie and fold bedding, and the soldier approached and said, Xia Yuan, can you teach us how to practice martial arts? Sure, I can teach you a few moves. Anyway, there's nothing to do while he's idle. Xia Yuan distributed some of the melon seeds in his hand and put the rest in his pocket, casually making a gesture. Hee, thank you. The soldier put these melon seeds in his pocket and imitated Xia Yuan's movements in a certain way. Practicing martial arts is definitely not something that happens overnight. Even though he has been studying for 20 years, it was his father and grandfather who spared no effort and abused himself every day to reach his current level. It took 4 or 5 years just to take a horse stance, whether it's cold or hot, to do it in the morning, afternoon, or evening. The war has already erupted, and it only takes a few days to arrive in North Korea. In these days, there is very little knowledge that I can impart to them. Even if I impart it to them, the US military will not give them much opportunity to engage in point-to-point combat. After all, there are guns, and who would charge forward with a knife to strike? But what can be taught is some. The basic moves and routines of the 8 extremes fist can be taught to them. The soldiers in the carriage were already idle, either chatting or wiping their guns. Seeing Xia Yuan teaching them martial arts, they saw Xia Yuan's martial arts during the day and approached like curious babies. On the other side, Wuqianli entrusted Wuqianli to be taken care of by his father Lei. He turned his head and saw Xia Yuan posing with 7 or 8 soldiers, showing a curious expression. Mei Xing walked up to Wuqianli and looked at Xia Yuan's posture, with a hint of a martial arts training posture. Is this practicing martial arts? Speaking of Xia Yuan, Wuqianli became interested and said, I met a good soldier who had been practicing martial arts for 20 years. He had excellent throwing skills and could throw stones over 100 meters away. In front of me, he steadily hit a tree branch with a bird on it. He withdrew his strength, otherwise he would have hit the bird. I took the initiative and pulled him into the team first. Upon hearing this, Mei Xing was immediately surprised and said, over 100 meters, so impressive. You didn't frame me, did you? Can you throw over 100 meters? Is that still human? They have not been trained to drop bombs, and being able to drop 50 meters is already extremely incredible. Xia Yuan was actually able to drop over 100 meters. If it's not a joke, it's a joke. Just take a look. Wuqianli smiled and watched as Xia Yuan taught them a basic routine. After a moment's pause, he realized that it was surprisingly useful and shouted, Yu Tsongrong and Pingyi, come and learn it. With this shout from Wuqianli, over 100 soldiers from the platoon gathered around, and even Wuqianli was learning in a certain way. This routine is very simple, called hanging collapse in the 8 extremes fist, which uses very little force to overturn the enemy. Hanging collapse is one of the small moves in the 8 extremes fist, but it is very practical. Even for a chubby person weighing over 200 pounds, standing steadily, Xia Yuan can still stumble on the ground with such a stumble. Of course, this is not simply using leg strength to trip, but rather using a certain technique. Who can come up and cooperate with me? I'll give you a practical explanation. Xia Yuan said for a while, but found that he couldn't understand. They couldn't understand at all, so why not demonstrate it to them on sight? Seeing no one up, Wuqianli shouted to Yu Tsongrong, go up and cooperate with Xia Yuan. I won't go, absolutely not. Yu Tsongrong shook his head straight, obviously afraid of being thrown by Xia Yuan. He turned his eyes and mobilized the power of the masses. Why don't the company commander cooperate with Xia Yuan? Everyone says, right. Yeah, Captain, you go cooperate. We all want to see you cooperate. Captain, why don't you go? Yu Tsongrong is too weak. That's it, you're a coward. The other soldiers all agreed, and it was not a big deal to watch a play. Wuqianli was also cheerful. Okay, I'll go up and cooperate. Don't run away later, try playing with me. Don't. Yu Tsongrong's face was bitter. Everyone laughed heartily. Xia Yuan smiled and made Wuqianli stand straight, then stretched out one of his legs, slightly bent, and patted his knee with his hand. The so-called hanging collapse is to use the momentum of the bent knee to return to the right position, explode, and trip the opponent, rather than simply using leg strength. It is still difficult to trip the opponent with leg strength. As he spoke, Xia Yuan stepped forward to prepare for the experiment and said, Captain, just stand up with force. Okay. Wuqianli nodded, expressing his understanding and tightening his body, stomping on the iron sheet of the stuffy jar carriage with his feet. The other soldiers either sat on the bed or gathered together, very curious. Xia Yuan patted his slightly bent right knee and smiled, saying, watch it. Then he walked over to Wuqianli's side, stretched his right leg back, and his knee suddenly straightened with force. The immense force directly relieved Wuqianli's tense body, causing him to uncontrollably tilt forward. Fortunately, Xia Yuan helped him and prevented him from falling to the ground. Wuqianli was surprised and said, sure, this technique is very practical. He personally tried it himself, and when he was caught off guard, he easily fell to the ground without any problem, especially when he looked at Xia Yuan's appearance, as if he didn't use much strength, and he increasingly felt the importance of this technique. Unfortunately, time is not enough, otherwise Wuqianli would have to pull Xia Yuan and serve as a trainer to train the soldiers of the 7th Company. Turning his gaze to the soldiers watching, he said, do you understand? Someone shook their head, someone nodded. Xia Yuan, come a few more times, Yu Tsongrong, come and cooperate. I'll give it a try later. Wuqianli became interested and forced Yu Tsongrong, who had a bitter expression on his face, to let Xia Yuan try a few times. He felt like he had found the way, so he pulled the other soldiers to start practicing. This exercise lasts for 1 hour. The train was speeding with a clang, from Zhejiang to the 3 eastern provinces. According to the speed of the stuffy tank military train, it wouldn't take 2 or 3 days to arrive, and they still had to stay on the train for a long time. Playing around for a while, the other soldiers sat on the bed still resting. Wuqianli pulled Meisheng to the small room in the carriage to chat, probably discussing something. Xia Yuan lay in bed, tapping on melon seeds, watching the soldiers inside the stuffy carriage. The soldiers were very lively, gathering together to chat and compare strength to strength, whether it was lively or not. Wuqianli returned to the ammunition box and sat down. Lei Suisheng played with his cigarette bag, while Yu Tsongrong lay on the bed, tapping melon seeds and staring at Wuqianli. Seeing Wuqianli feel uneasy all over, he glared at Yu Tsongrong and said, what are you looking at? Yu Tsongrong was enjoying eating melon seeds and said, big girl, you're afraid to see. The other soldiers laughed heartily, and Xia Yuan watched the scene quietly. In a moment, he would be able to shoot himself. Lei Suisheng walked up to Yu Tsongrong's bed and leaned against it, why did you join the army? Wuqianli replied in a forced voice, in order to make my brother look up to me. Lei Suisheng said, what kind of words do you say? Let your enemies look up to you, that's what makes you tough. Wuqianli remained silent, his gaze swept over a machine gun on the ammunition box, and he asked, when will you fire my gun? If you want a gun, turn it over on the battlefield. Lei Suisheng fiddled with the machine gun beside him. Unexpectedly, Wuqianli jumped off the ammunition box and grabbed the submachine gun that Yu Tsongrong had placed at his feet, holding it in his arms. Lei Suisheng looked up and was slightly surprised, Yu Tsongrong. Yu Tsongrong's movements were faster. He quickly jumped out of the car, grabbed the gun, and threw it to Pingy. Pingy, take it. Turning around, he reached out and grabbed Wuqianli's collar, pushing it back forcefully. Wuqianli, who was still weak in strength, was pushed and almost fell to the ground. If it weren't for the soldiers behind him supporting him, the just push would probably have pushed him directly to the ground. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, 677 Warriors, Xia Yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, 677 Warriors, Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan sat on the bed, looking at the two with joy. Wuqianli was still not satisfied, took off his backpack behind him, and threw it to the ground. Yoha! Yu Tsongrong saw that Wuqianli had a temper, and he didn't confront this kid hard. In the narrow carriage, Yu came and went, and soon the whole carriage became lively, with shadows of the two chasing each other everywhere. Xia Yuan couldn't help but laugh as he watched. When this scene happened beside him, it was quite interesting, but it diluted his nervousness in dealing with future wars. On the other hand, the soldiers of the 7th Company were naturally optimistic, with smiles on their faces and no signs of nervousness. They didn't even care if they could come back from this trip, which made Xia Yuan admire the people of this era from the bottom of his heart. Clear love, only for China. The soldiers of this era interpret this sentence vividly, living for the country and dying for the country. Looking at the smiling faces and recalling the soldiers who sacrificed for their country in the war, Xia Yuan inexplicably felt heartbroken and took a breath. Although my personal strength is small, I cannot change the overall situation. The only thing that can be changed is the personal fate of some of them. Even if it's just one change, I have to work hard. Xia Yuan's greatest reliance is on watching movies, knowing the plot, and carrying a golden finger. Perhaps I can use my familiarity with the plot to change something and avoid some encounters. The silent Pingy also felt a little happy as he walked over and said, he doesn't know how to tease, that's about it. Wuqianli was gasping for breath as he was slipping heavily. Yu Tsongrong was agile, jumping up and down on the battlefield, dodging countless bullets. Avoiding Wuqianli's grasp, he reached out and grabbed the bed frame, continuing to provoke Wuqianli. Come on, Guawazi. Wuqianli was very angry and reached out to continue catching Yu Tsongrong. Yu Tsongrong was like a slippery mouse, dodging through the gaps in Wuqianli's bed. He took 3 steps and 2 steps, sitting on the 2nd floor while stepping on the 1st floor of the bed. When Wuqianli ran over, he caught him again. Yu Tsongrong used the bed as a cover, flipped over from the bed, and continued to tease Wuqianli. He said, let me introduce you to you. My name is Yu Tsongrong, and I have a platoon of 7 in a row. When others charge, there are enemies in front of me, and I charge. In front of me, behind me, I have enemies on my left and right. Wuqianli's face turned red due to exhaustion, and he didn't listen to this. He angrily punched and was embraced by Yu Tsongrong, saying, I'm not satisfied. Wuqianli remained silent and fought back against Yu Tsongrong with action. This is your lay dad, your big brother, your second brother, all soldiers he brought out. The one behind you, the sharpshooter Pingy. The 2 of them who were fighting caused the carriage to fly like chickens and dogs, startling Wuqianli and Mei Sheng in the room. When they walked out, they saw the 2 of them jumping up and down to chase after each other, while other soldiers were watching the play, eating, and making noise. The sealed carriage was filled with a strange smell. Yu Tsongrong saw 5,000 miles and quickly stood up straight. Stand at attention. Upon hearing the shout, Xia Yuan flipped over and jumped off the bed, standing at attention. Wuqianli was not convinced and suffered great injustice. He turned around and was about to leave. Wuqianli shouted, come back. Don't move. Xia Yuan caught Wuqianli, who was running over. Wuqianli glanced at Xia Yuan, holding his head in silence. Mei Sheng followed behind Wuqianli and walked over, sternly questioning, what is this place? The 7th Interlude. The soldiers answered with resounding force, and in this sealed carriage, the sound was muffled, causing eardrums to bulge. Mei Xing raised her voice and said, "Seventh Company, it's not like this. Did I walk in the wrong carriage?" Lei Suixing stood aside, taking cover and said, "I asked Yu Tsongrong to test his temperament." Wuqianli looked at Wuqianli with a look of grievance and said, "Brother, they bullied me." Wuqianli. "Bully, you fight back." Wuqianli said wrongly, "There are many of them. Every time the 7th Company encounters an enemy, they are several times more numerous than us. You go tell the enemy that there are many of you. Will the enemy listen to you? No, they will only shoot you to death. We can only hold the gun in our hands and fight back fiercely. Don't complain, don't be aggrieved, face is earned and fought for ourselves." Wuqianli spoke earnestly and walked up to Wuqianli, helping him straighten his hat brim. He glanced at Xia Yuan beside him and nodded, "Now let's hold Comrade Xia Yuan's joining ceremony." The stuffy tank military train was clanging along the railway tracks, and the carriage was scorching hot. The soldiers stood at attention in the corridor in the middle of the carriage, and the carriage swayed slightly with the train. However, their spine was like a mountain, towering and motionless. A table stacked with ammunition boxes was placed in the middle, covered with a red cloth, with 4 hand grenades and 2 .38 large lids. Xia Yuan and Wuqianli stood in the middle. He Changgui raised his voice and said, "Salute." The military salutes of all the soldiers were not standard, but Xia Yuan and Wuqianli also looked up and straightened their chests. After the ceremony, Wuqianli looked at Yu Tsongrong and said, "Yu Tsongrong, arrive. You are an old comrade now. Tell Comrade Xia Yuan and Comrade Wuqianli how Captain Wu Bailey sacrificed himself." 500 miles, in the Huaihai Sea, a small number of troops took the initiative to attack, and after capturing the enemy bunker group, in order to protect their comrades. Yu Tsongrong's voice choked up and he said in a deep voice, "I have fallen." Wuqianli stared blankly at Yu Tsongrong, while Xia Yuan's face remained silent. Mei Xing continued with Yu Tsongrong's words, "After the company commander fell, what did the 7th Company do?" Yu Tsongrong's voice suddenly changed, becoming resounding and firm. "The 7th Interpenetrating Company has annihilated and captured enemies far beyond my own strength by 6 times. The enemy bunker group that claims to be able to block our army for a year has only blocked the 7th Company. Half a day." The voice suddenly became proud, and the gaze became more determined. Lei Suixing spoke calmly, "The enemy's rear is the front line of our company. The 7th Company exchanged its heavy casualties for our army's small casualties." Mei Xing continued, "The casualties are not worth boasting about, just hold on is everything." At this moment, Xia Yuan felt as if a flame was burning in his heart. Only when he truly lived in this era could he feel the tenacity, stubbornness, and indomitable spirit emanating from the people of this era. Mei Xing looked at Xia Yuan and Wuqianli and said, "Xia Yuan and Wuqianli, you are the 677th and 678th soldiers of the 7th Interlacing Company. You too might say, where are there so many people? Isn't this carriage just 100 or so people?" Wuqianli looked at the soldiers beside him with a firm gaze. "We are adding together all the comrades who have sacrificed, been injured, and retired since our 7th Company. Plus you too. I am the 7th Interlude Company, the 135th Warrior, Mei Xing. The 22nd Warrior, Yu Tsongrong. 280th place, Pingyi. The 35th Warrior, He Changgui. 572nd Soldier, Li Zhizheng. Each soldier of the 7th Company deeply remembers their own number, which seems to represent their lives. Wuqianli looked at the two and said, 162nd, 5,000 miles. 161st, 500 miles. Lei Suixing took advantage of the sound and said, 17th Warrior, Lei Suixing. And you? Wuqianli watched foolishly, shocked by the scene before him. 677th Warrior, Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan knows what each number represents, and these numbers have been deeply engraved in the hearts of the soldiers of the 7th Company, unforgettable in this lifetime. Wuqianli's lips hesitated as Mei Xing said, "I'll say it again." Needless to say, on the battlefield, what should be remembered will definitely be remembered. Wuqianli interrupted directly and walked up to Wuqianli, saying, "You're afraid the veterans won't accept you. I'll tell you, only when you're on the battlefield will you know if they'll accept you." He ignored Wuqianli's attempt to speak and continued to teach, if an egg is knocked open from outside, it is destined to be eaten. You must be able to peck it open from inside, maybe it's an eagle. Wuqianli looked around and said, "I declare that Comrade Wuqianli is unorganized, undisciplined, and has caused trouble by showing off his strength. The originally scheduled gun ceremony has been cancelled. Welcome to the 67th soldier, Xia Yuan. Yu Tsongrong. Give him a gun." "Yes." Yu Tsongrong walked out, grabbed the gun and grenade on the table, and solemnly handed them over to Xia Yuan. Xia Yuan solemnly caught the gun and couldn't put it down. This rifle was a Type 38 rifle, equipped in Japanese style, and was seized from the Japanese army during the anti-Japanese war. It was also the most equipped rifle in the entire army. The types of weapons and equipment equipped by the 7th Company are modeled, including Japanese weapons, American weapons, British weapons, as well as weapons supported by the Soviet Union and well-established universal brands. A Type 38 rifle was enough to make him very happy. Wuqianli's eyes turned red and he angrily said, "I'm not doing it anymore. You don't want me to join the army from the beginning. Alright, let me go." He turned around and directly opened the iron door of the stuffy carriage. The howling cold wind instantly poured into the carriage, and Xia Yuan moved very quickly. He turned around and hugged 50,000 miles. At this moment, the stuffy jar military line had already arrived at a magnificent mountain and river. The setting sun and fiery red light scattered on the earth, casting a colorful glow on the mountains and rivers. The clouds and mist in the mountains were floating, and the Great Wall lay like a giant dragon. The soldiers of the 7th Company were all startled by the magnificent mountains and rivers, allowing the strong wind to howl and blow off their military hats. Xia Yuan gradually loosened his grip for 50,000 miles, watching the magnificent mountains and rivers, the land of his motherland, and the Great Wall perched on high mountains in the distance, lying like a giant dragon. His heart pounded. An inexplicable emotion lingered in the 7th consecutive episode. Wuqianli gazed at the beautiful mountains and rivers of his motherland, and his ears were filled with the admonition he had just given 5,000 miles ago. A seed was quietly buried in his heart, and Wuqianli seemed to understand something. Wuqianli squinted his eyes and said solemnly, "I'll punish you to stand here until dawn." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Aim at Specialization Level. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Aim at Specialization Level. Mastery Skills. Octopus Fist Proficiency Level, 85357/100000, English Beginner Level, 746/1000, Chinese Master Level, 311257/100000, Throwing Master Level, 7/10000000, Aiming Beginner Level, 3/1000, Skill Proficiency Level. Beginner, 1000, Proficient, 10,000, Specialized, 100000, Master, 10000000, Grandmaster, 10000000. Xia Yuan, holding the gun, couldn't put it down and opened the system. In addition to the master bombing level he had previously obtained, he also had an entry-level aiming level. The system panel data is very simple, but it can intuitively see my body attributes and changes in skills. Proficiency allows me to see my own growth. The higher the level, the higher the proficiency required to improve these skills. I need to find ways to improve the proficiency of these skills. The gun-giving ceremony has ended, and it's already dark outside. Dinner is a sticky meal made of stir-fried flour and some water. It tastes sticky and not very good, but there's not much food on the train, so we can only make do with it. After dinner, Xia Yuan sat on his bed, holding a gun and couldn't put it down. The emergence of aiming skills showed him the wild hope that he could play a huge role in the future battlefield. And there is also a master-level bomb dropping as an aid. If aiming is also at the master level, combined with expertise in the 8 Extremes Fist, one will become a super soldier. It's just that my own practice of the 8 Extremes Fist for 19 years is still at the specialized level. I don't know if it's because the proficiency of the 8 Extremes Fist is difficult to improve, or because it's too difficult to practice. Since there is proficiency, there should be ways to improve. Feeling the gun and thinking of aiming with skills, Xia Yuan picked up the gun and looked for a reference point to aim at. Target entry. Level, 6/1000, proficiency fluctuated 3 times. Xia Yuan was surprised. That is to say, if you aim your gun 300 or 400 times, you can elevate your aim by 1 level. It's very simple, isn't it? Xia Yuan can do whatever he says. This kind of aiming is easy for him. He doesn't need to shoot, just pick it up and aim, then put it down. This is equivalent to completing 1 aiming. So, in some dimly lit carriages, Xia Yuan sat on the bed, picked up the gun, put it down again, picked it up again, and put it down again. Wuqianli stood quietly in front of the train carriage door, his body swaying left and right with the stuffy jar. Lei Suixing walked up to Wuqianli with a gun and handed it to him. "Take it," he said, seeing him hesitating. Lei Suixing smiled and said, "Your brother agreed." Wuqianli smiled happily and solemnly took the gun with his back behind him. Lei Suixing explained again, "Remember, never point your gun at your own person." Wuqianli pursed his lips and nodded. Lei Suixing handed the military cap in his hand to Wuqianli and turned around to leave, saying, "You sleep in my upper bunk, go." Wuqianli took the hat handed over by Lei Suixing and put it neatly on his head, saying, "The platoon leader asked me to stand until dawn, it's not time yet." Lei Suixing scolded and left, "You 3 brothers, none of you are worry-free." The car with the lights off looked at Wuqianli quietly, with a pleased smile on his face. He looked at Wuqianli quietly and turned his head into the room. The sound of closing the door rang in his ear, and Wuqianli turned his head to look. Returning to the room, Wuqianli took out a small notebook and wrote on it, stroke by stroke, 6, 7, 7, 7, 7, 8, 5,000 li. Lei Suixing came to his bed and suddenly caught a glimpse of a sleeping figure in Yu Zongrong's shop. Upon closer inspection, Xia Yuan stayed up for most of the night, holding a gun and then putting it down, following a demon. "What are you doing, kid?" Xia Yuan turned around and saw Lei Suixing. He turned his head and continued to hold the gun down, muttering, "Practice aiming with the gun. I want to make lifting the gun a muscle memory, seeing the enemy pick up the gun and shoot in an instant." Lei Suixing was stunned for a moment, silently lying on his own bed. The 3 people who were originally not easy to worry about now have become 4. In the invisible air, a screen unfolds with a string of numbers displayed on it. Target entry. Level, 927/1000, it's almost time to upgrade. Xia Yuan pursed his lips, carefully picked up the gun and then put it down. This mechanical connection made his arms tingling, which was not a problem, but it affected his speed of lifting and putting it down. Finally, the proficiency reached the level of 999. With Xia Yuan's last lift and drop, the number jumped to 2, and the upper limit of proficiency changed from 1,000 to 10,000. He raised his gun again to shoot and found that his entire movement was smooth and coherent, like an experienced veteran. Has there been any effect? Xia Yuan is slightly pleased. The presentation of body data brought by the system is more intuitive, and progress bars can be directly seen. Each skill level improvement is like crossing a tribulation, and after improvement, there will be different insights. The proficiency of practicing shooting and aiming with a gun has increased from 3 points to 6 points, requiring oneself to lift and lower it at least nearly 2,000 times. As long as there is a goal, then there is motivation. With the progress bar, Xia Yuan believed in the Liver Emperor and voluntarily became one. All night long, Xia Yuan didn't sleep, practicing non-stop, his arms stiffened, and he didn't remember how many times he practiced until he was exhausted and lay down to sleep. Targeting specialization level, 52/100000, the aiming skill has also reached the level of specialization. Although not an unparalleled sniper, he is also a skilled sniper. Practice makes perfect, and Xia Yuan hardly needs to aim at moving targets within 100 meters. He can hit them with his gun. This is the effect of aiming, very terrifying. If he reaches the master level, he may become a sniper who can hit every shot without a single shot. If he reaches the master level, it is unimaginable that Xia Yuan currently does not have a master level. The train arrived in Shandong at 9 a.m. the next day, and they will rest in Shandong. However, due to time constraints, they did not rest for much time. Find a way to get some cotton clothes. This is Xia Yuan's idea. He knew the terrifying temperature in North Korea, so when he was resting in Shandong, he found Company Commander Wuqianli and told him the information he had told his division commander before. Wuqianli, who received the message from Xia Yuan, took it very seriously. On a day below -40°C, they really wore such thin clothes and went to Titing to freeze to death. During the period when Wuqianli went to ask for a cotton jacket, Xia Yuan was anxiously waiting. His personal strength was too weak, and he could only rely on Wuqianli. When Wuqianli returned, he only brought back 20 sets of cotton jackets. All the companies are short of cotton jackets, and the cotton jackets here are not enough to be distributed. Each company has been distributed, and one company has only been allocated 20 sets. The rest of the cotton jackets are still on the way. Xia Yuan remained silent. The situation in North Korea has become so urgent that it is estimated that the vast majority of cotton jackets have already been sent to the front line. It is worth considering that the 9th Corps was the second batch of troops to enter North Korea for combat, and they set off in a very hasty manner, with many supplies not keeping up. 20 sets of cotton clothes. Xia Yuan takes a deep breath. Even if he tries hard to change, can't he change it? Is there no way at all? There will be a way, there must be a way to drive to the front of the mountain. The volunteer soldiers entered North Korea without any preparation, and the American emperor, who still fought away, as someone who controlled the system, should face the upcoming war with tenacious fighting spirit. I cannot embarrass the post.90s generation. End of this chapter.